What's a fact from history that sounds completely fake? The Taiping Rebellion. A Chinese man living in the middle of the 19th century claimed to be the brother of Jesus. He came to be the leader of a rebellion in which somewhere between 20 and 100 million people died. It killed more people than World War I. Problem with Chinese statistics is they are so bloody inaccurate. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, once snuck up on his own wife, Marsha Winslow, as they were getting out of their car after a party and began to strangle her. She screamed and tried to fight him off until she realized it was him, at which point he stopped and tried to convince her that it was him strangling her. It must have been someone else. She stayed with him for several years after that incident. John Tyler, the 10th U.S. president, still has a living grandchild. How? Tyler had a son in 1853. Tyler's son had a son in 1929. Damn, he had a child at 76. Chevalier d'Eon was a French diplomat and spy in England and Russia. Once he retired, he revealed to the public that he had been a woman the entire time. She was henceforth made to wear gender-appropriate clothing for the rest of her life. She went on to write some books and support the American Revolution. But here's the kicker. When she died, they found out she was actually a man the whole time. He was double cross-dressing. Genghis Khan likely had at least 1,000 children, 13 kids in his hierarchical lineage, and over 500 wives and mistresses. So many offspring that his Y chromosomal lineage is carried by about 1 in every 200 men living today. This could be a similar number, but I heard 3 people in Asia have his genes. His pet parrot had to be removed from the funeral of President Andrew Jackson because it was swearing so much. That actually happened. I am guessing he copies what the president was swearing. According to his biography, yes, it happened. He also beat a would-be assassin with a cane, and is the only president in history who completely paid off the national debt. The last guillotine execution in France took place after the first Star Wars movie was released, like immediately after the premiere. Yes, while the credits were rolling actually. Krum the Horrible, who ruled Bulgaria in the 9th century, drank from the hollowed out skull of his opponent, the former emperor of the Byzantine Empire. I was a fucking legend in Gin Alley. I haven't lost a fight since I was 9. There was this guy in the early days of aviation named William Christmas. He created what is often considered the worst plane ever. He designed the wings to be super thin sheets of metal because he thought it would be better if they flapped like a bird. He had another engineer working with him, Vincent Bernelli, who tried to make changes, such as strengthening the wings, but Christmas wouldn't budge. He pitched this to the U.S. Army during WWI, claiming that they could abduct the Kaiser with it, as it would be able to outrun any German aircraft. Instead, the wings predictably broke off in its first test flight, killing the test pilot, and they didn't tell the army about it. Then they tested it again, and the same thing happened. The army withdrew their support after that, and no new prototypes were made. This guy was a super incompetent aircraft designer, but apparently he is often credited with inventing ailerons, which has been the default method of controlling airplane roll for the last century. There are dicks everywhere in Pompeii. DKS. Everywhere. On walls, streets, posts, carved into wood and stone, arranged in tile mosaics. They re all over the fucking place. You can swing a cat without whacking a sklang. They reused as arrows to point to brothels. Scrawled on walls in graffiti about how good the women are in the city. When you went to the baths, you'd put your clothes in little cubby holes, and you'd remember which column of cubbies you left them in by the mosaic of a particular sex act above said column. You can swing a cat without whacking a sklang is the single best sentence I've ever seen. After the Dravlians killed Igor of Kiev, his wife Olga took revenge when she was regent. First, Dravlian messengers, who were tasked to inform her that she was to marry their king, were carried by the people of Kiev and were thrown into a trench that was dug the first day, and the messengers were buried. Second, she invited Dravlian dignitaries to Kiev by telling them that she would return with them to accept the honor of her betrothal to the king. She invited them to a bathhouse had the house locked, and had the house burned with them in it. Third, to mourn the death of her husband. She told the Dravlians to prepare a quantity of mead at the site of her husband's death. The Dravlianess got drunk on the mead, and she ordered her people to kill them. Finally, she drove the survivors back to their city. She ordered tribute, and would let them go in peace. The tribute was 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house. She received the tribute, tied a piece of sulfur on the bird's legs, and attached a piece of cloth to the sulfur. She then had the birds released. Having set the cloth on fire, the birds returned to their nests, and subsequently burned down the city. In AD 950, she went to Constantinople and converted to Christianity. She Christianized Eastern Europe and was later made a saint. The reason why mummies are so rare is because we kept eating them. We grinded them up and turned them into paint also. Many older paintings were made with mummy brown. Didn't he know that one? The mummy abuse is unreal. The first time the Germans used mustard gas in WW1 against the British, a strong gust of wind blew it back on them and killed the men who deployed it. Or that time they deployed the gas and 100 Russians survived it and death charged the Krauts. Attack of the Dead Men. Yes. The McAfee CEO's entire life. For example, he did a stint in Guatemalan prison. That man is cocaine fueled crazy. Psycho. Groupie. Cocaine. Crazy. The sinking of the Titanic. Not the sinking itself, but the circumstances around it. Think about it. It was the largest moving object built by humans at the time. It sank on its maiden voyage. Had its architect designer on board. It was the last voyage of the captain before his retirement. Any movie studio would throw that script out for being too over the top. Yeah. The one last cruise and then airlines retire thing from the captain is definitively the trope of the policeman 2 days away from retirement being killed. Now I want a movie about a policeman 2 days from retirement who gets super paranoid because he watches too many movies. It can either be a comedy with a guy scared out of his wits of everything, or a psychological drama that ends in a bitter irony. For example, the guy getting killed in a domestic incident while his partner survives a dangerous shootout or whatever. Theodore Roosevelt was shot mid-speech and then proceeded to continue speaking for 84 minutes. He survived, even asking the shooter why he did it before remarking it's no use. Turn him over to the police. Might not sound as fake as the other facts, but man, don't he forget how he mocked him throughout the rest of the speech, most of which the assassin was present for as he was detained awaiting the police's arrival. Napoleon was attacked by an army of bunny rabbits. Guess he forgot his stock of holy hand grenades. 1, 2, 5. The entire Boston molasses disaster. A storage tank burst and flooded the streets with hot, slow-moving molasses, killing 21 people. It sounds like something caused by main characters in a time travel comedy. Reportedly it moved as fast as 35 miles per hour. If that is what you call slow. In 1666, a baker burnt down all of medieval London. The fire started because he left the bread in the oven too long. Legend states that a cow knocking over a lantern started the Great Chicago Fire. So really anything can start horrific fires. Heck, a gender reveal party, of all things, started the fires in California in 2020. Former Prime Minister of Australia, Bob Hawke, held the world record for sculling a yard glass of beer in 11 seconds. Pretty sure that's the main requirement for becoming PM of Australia. The Pig War of 1858. One farmer shot another farmer's pig, and the resulting dispute snowballed into a military standoff with warships and artillery. It didn't snowball. It just pushed the already massive snowball down the hill. It was a British farmer's pig that wandered over to the American side of a divided island. The island was already contested, and military tension were high. The Germans and Russians once called a temporary unofficial ceasefire in World War I because of wolves invading the battlefield. They were displaced from their normal hunting grounds and looking for something to eat, which turned out to be local livestock, corpses, children, and unwary or incapacitated soldiers. It got so bad that everyone stopped shooting at each other for a while so they could hunt them down, proving once more that the threat of being eaten is stronger than any political ideal. There was also an unofficial ceasefire during Christmas peace of 1914, where soldiers met on the battlefield, sang Christmas songs and played soccer. They communicated they would unfortunately have to start fighting again after Christmas. Of all ancient civilizations, Carthage is the only one where the incidence of human sacrifice increased over time. I am changing my favorite in the Punic Wars. Andrew Jackson's last words were, "I would like to hang John C. Calhoun and shoot Henry Clay," two of his political adversaries during his presidency, after being asked if he had any regrets. Wait, these are all about Andrew Jackson. Is this some kind of 20-bill propaganda post? Andrew Jackson was just that unique. He was the first Floridaman. A mad lad stormed the beaches in Normandy on D-Day with a broadsword in hand. Wasn't he the one playing bagpipes too? His name was Jack Churchill. The German snipers avoided shooting him because they thought he was mad and felt sorry for him. He is also credited with a kill using a bow and arrow, probably the only such kill in the war. After the death of his wife, Joseph Stalin started holding nightly dinners that would start around 4 in the afternoon and run until almost 5 in the morning. This was less about actually eating and more about him and his entire political staff getting so drunk that the servants feared they would literally die. He was also a huge fan of practical jokes, the favorite apparently being pushing various Russian politicians into the pond. The movie The Death of Stalin begins with this. The Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than to the Stegosaurus. Stegosaurs existed about 144 million years ago, while tyrannosaurs were about 65 million years ago. Curse your sudden yet inevitable betrayal. We discovered Uranus nearly 40 years before Antarctica. Actually, humans had discovered the Antarctic thousands of years prior to when the West discovered it in 1818. If you look at any map pre-16th century, the Antarctic is there, but disappeared later. Yeah, but there are claims that map may be a fake, if you're referring to the Piri-Reis map, at least. WWI Christmas truce. Both sides stopped bombing and killing each other for Christmas, and partied together in the center of the trenches and swapped gifts. Every time I hear this fact it makes me wanna cry. Cause you know damn well these men didn't want to kill each other. They were forced to. During WWII, India was a British territory and thus at risk from German bombing. To protect one of the most beautiful national monuments, the Taj Mahal, it was covered with bamboo scaffolding, effectively making it look like a bamboo stockpile for bomber planes in the sky. The trick apparently worked, because the monument didn't get a single scratch on it from the bombing. The Germans were able to get aircraft all the way to India. Well, they needed to take out the colonies which were involuntarily supplying resources to the struggling British. Without the Holodge trial the Kardashians wouldn't exist. I don't think that's true. They were already rich before the trial and only got the reality show because of Kim's friendship with Paris Hilton and the sex tape. The audience for the reality show wouldn't even know who Robert Kardashian was. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died on the same day, July 4, 1826, on the nation's 50th anniversary. Adams' last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." He didn't know that Jefferson had died a few hours earlier. In WW1, the Germans didn't want Belgian soldiers passing through the Netherlands around the German lines, so they built a 300 kilometers long electric fence. People actually died trying to get across, which sounds even more ridiculous. The Dutch were completely fine with the Germans doing it. To edit, it has been brought to my attention that the concept of electricity was unfamiliar to rural Belgians in 1915. In a compromise effort to stop secession, Abraham Lincoln backed the Corwin Amendment, which would have permanently and irrevocably legalized slavery in the Constitution. Wasn't it Buchanan who supported it? And Lincoln basically said it's passed and approved, so not going to do anything against it, rather than actively backing it. A woman was sentenced to death for cheating on her husband, was hung. pronounced dead, and was being transported for whatever burial she was entitled to when she woke up. Since the death certificate was signed, the sentence had been carried out. It was legally a divorce because of death, do us part and all that. So she was free to get remarried and live out the rest of her life. The Great Emu War of Australia, which we actually lost. May you clarify if you are an emu or an Australian. Australian. Unfortunately. Sorry for your loss. In the 1600s, Japanese samurai fought with Mexican soldiers in Acapulco. We know this because it was recorded by the grandson of an Aztec king. No wonder why Mexicans freaking love anime. This is an ethnic stereotype of which I was unaware. French people were still using guillotine as executing method at 70s. Last person executed with a guillotine was executed 1977. Lysimachus, one of the post-Alexander kings who ruled over Thrace, attempted to conquer Dacia, which was completely disunited at the time. When the Dacians heard of his invasion, they united in an alliance against him, sending someone who pretended to be a deserter to Lysimachus. This fake deserted proceeded to get Lysimachus to take his army straight into an ambush on terrain that his army would be at a disadvantage in, winning the battle pretty easily and taking Lysimachus captive. The Dacians then proceeded to throw Lysimachus a feast, treating him greatly, with one of Lysimachus' daughters afterwards marrying the leader of the Dacian alliance. Charlie Chaplin outlived Elvis Presley. I don't remember who it was in history, but I believe he was some Scottish military leader guy. He cut off the head of his enemy and hooked it onto his horse to show everyone he had finally done it. As he rode his horse around, the teeth of the severed head scraped his leg, and it went septic and he died. Guy killed his mortal enemy and his enemy still found a way to win. Sigurd Easteenson. He challenged ML Brigg the Bucktooth to a battle, cheated and won, but Brigg had the last laugh. Those buckteeth ended up revenging him, and it was all over Ireland. Sigurd's descendants didn't he even want. Great Britain and USA almost went to war over a dead pig. The Kaiser of Germany had to moderate that crisis. Oversimplified did a video and mentioned her, but there was a woman named Carrie Nation who decided to help with prohibition by smashing shit with a hatchet in Kansas. The temperance movement had a lot of support for feminists because they wanted men to stop getting drunk and beating their wives. Also, Carrie Nation was anti-corset. The Young Turks killed approximate 1,500,000 Armenians in the Ottoman Empire genocides between 1890s and 1922, and Hitler took notice. In WW2, Germans killed a lot of Shiba Inus because they used their fur as coats. Shiba Inus almost got extinct because of that. Sorry, bad grammar. English wasn't my first language. A long time ago, on a screenwriting table far, far away, there were, at one point, 2 musical numbers put in Star Wars and kept in the original final film. A lot of coincidences from the U.S. Civil War. Really? Like the fact that the Confederate artillery officer who led the attack on Fort Sumter was a former student of the Union commander inside the fort. Or the fact that a Union naval officer literally died in the arms of his Confederate father at the Battle of Galveston in January of 1863. Lots of stuff like that happening when you have a civil war, though, I suppose. Big edit. How could I forget that one of the people who lived at the site of the Bull Run Manassas battlefield in July 1861 moved his family to Appomattox Courthouse to avoid the conflict, only to have Lee surrender to Grant in his front parlor less than 4 years later. That's unbelievable. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.